Morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Isabel Franco. I'm here with my dear friend Cynthia Catlin, and this is the first Breakfast with Tom Fox of the year, so it's extremely special. And I think there's still time for us, to wish you a wonderful 2024, no longer New Year, but with the best for everyone, including for our country in the United States in terms of anti-corruption. Cynthia?
Thank you, Isabel. As always, this is one of my favorite events. We try to do it every quarter. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I have a couple of reminders. There's live interpretation from English to Portuguese for those of you who prefer to listen to this event in Portuguese. We have with us Tom Fox, who I think by now everyone knows very well. Tom, it's always an honor to have you with us. Tom is the compliance evangelist, has published several books on compliance, and is really a resource to me and others in the market when we have questions regarding fraud, corruption, FCPA, compliance. So thank you for joining us, Tom.
Cynthia, the pleasure, as always, is mine.
Excellent. Thank you. And also, I just wanted to make sure for all of those of you who are new to this event, please submit your questions in the chat box. And Monica, who Isabel will introduce, will be moderating the event. And we appreciate all your comments, questions, and we hope this is as interactive and as informational as possible. Thank you. And with that, you, Isabel.
Thank you so much again, Cynthia. We're back to Teams, so I'm a little lost right now. I'm going to ask Tatiana to help me. Where is the button for the interpreter, Tatiana? I cannot find it. So
I think when you join, sorry, go ahead, Tati.
Vou falar em português, porque quem está precisando da tradução vai preferir em português.
Verdade.
Aparece um pop-up quando a pessoa ingressa, e é só selecionar esse pop-up que você deseja escutar em português, que aí você vai para o canal do intérprete.
Ótimo, mas não tem, então, como no Zoom, a gente ia de uma sala para outra a hora que a gente quisesse.
Não, só faz a troca do áudio mesmo, e aí passa a ouvir o áudio do nosso intérprete, o Carlos.
Ok, muito obrigada. Thank you so much, everyone. Tom, thanks for bearing with us for a minute about the instructions. So, in any case, give us your questions in Portuguese or in English, it doesn't matter, in the chat. Tell us your name and the organization you're with. And Monica, this incredible moderator, will put them in English or in Portuguese. It's really not an issue. We just want to hear your questions. So, having said that, Monica is a dear friend. She co-founded the Instituto Não Aceito Corrupção, the Institute Against I Don't Accept Corruption is what's called. And we were on the board for a while, and then I'm no longer there. I resigned last year, but she's a lawyer, graduated from University of São Paulo, USP, Largo do São Francisco, and also has a master's degree from Este of Paris, and also the IACA, International Anti-Corruption Academy in Vienna. She's the author of a book, Somos Todos Corruptos, Pequeno Manual de Ético Chato. I love that book. She also ran as a candidate for House of Representative in the lower house with this theme of anti-corruption. She was executive secretary at the, I'm going to say this in Portuguese again, Frente Parlamentar Ética contra a Corrupção. And today, we're lucky to have her as the Secretária de Governança Institucional da OAB São Paulo. I am part of the leadership of the Compliance Commission of the OAB São Paulo, and we're happy to have Monica as our Secretária da Governança. So with all this long introductions, just to say how proud I am of your work, Monica, and you represent me. So having said that, following our format here, Tom will give us this wonderful gift of his explanations or all of the information of what's going on in the world right now, the world of anti-corruption, the transfer 2024. And when he ends, please feel free to ask all your questions. Monica will moderate us. Tom, thank you so much for the gift of being with us here for 4 times a year.
It's really my treat, Isabel, and I look forward to this as well. What I wanted to talk about today was something that really caught my eye, and I did a little research and wrote a paper that hopefully will be available to everyone on this call, if not translated into Portuguese, at least in English. And what that paper talks about is the need for, or rather, how the U.S. Department of Justice has treated companies who find themselves in FCPA investigations. And what I did was look at some of the key factors that the Department of Justice listed in the settlement documents, whether it was a deferred prosecution agreement, whether it was a non-prosecution agreement, or something else. And I wrote this paper before, obviously, today, which meant that the Gunvor FCPA settlement, which was announced late last week, is not in this paper. So if you don't see anything about this most recent settlement of $661 million, that's the reason. But I'm going to include some remarks around that case as well. You just won't see anything in the paper. So starting in December of 2022, we had a major FCPA settlement with a Swiss company called ABB. And the biggest significance of this case was that ABB is the first-time, 3-time violator of the FCPA. And this case came out after the announcement of the Monaco memo, which we've talked about in a prior webinar. But the Monaco memo said basically, if you're a recidivist, meaning you have more than one violation, we're going to bring the hammer down on you. Well, that didn't happen with ABB. ABB got a fabulous settlement, 300+ million, but in terms of the scope of the overall bribery and corruption schemes, which literally went to the corporate home office in Switzerland. So the question was, how did they get this great settlement? Well, there are 3 key factors from the ABB case. And you will see these themes throughout these 3 cases. I'm going to start with self-disclosure, because ABB did not self-disclose, but there was literally pages written by the Department of Justice on this issue. And so I'm going to go through it. And if I made this story up and told it to you, you would go, Tom, you made that up. This could never happen. Well, here's what happened. ABB discovered its South African subsidiary had engaged in bribery and corruption, did enough of an investigation to know they had a problem. They called the Department of Justice and said, we want to schedule an appointment to come talk to you. That's it. The day before the scheduled appointment, the South African press broke the story of ABB's corruption in South Africa. So ABB did not self-disclose. They had called and scheduled a meeting, but they didn't tell the DOJ we're scheduling a meeting to self-disclose. So that cost ABB millions of dollars because they didn't self-disclose. But the real significance was the Department of Justice writing pages and pages about ABB trying to self-disclose and failing to do so. And so what I call it is near self-disclosure. And what it got ABB is it bought them credibility with the Department of Justice, even if they couldn't come under the self-disclosure policies that were in place then. That's number one. So the key lesson there was self-disclosure. Number two, and this once again, if I told you this, you would say, well, you made that up, Tom. Nobody does this. The DOJ previously had a requirement for extraordinary cooperation. And I mean, Isabel knows what cooperation with the Department of Justice is. There may be many others or several others on this call who know what that is. Well, that's no longer enough. Now you have to have extra double, truly extraordinary cooperation. What is it? Well, here's what the DOJ says. We know it when we see it. Now, you're a lawyer like me, that's a pretty difficult standard. We laugh here in the United States. There was a famous case involving pornography at the U.S. Supreme Court. And the question was whether or not you could be criminally prosecuted for that. And the justice who wrote the opinion said, I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it. So in the U.S., well, that's the big joke. You know it when you see it. And that's what the Department of Justice said, literally. We know it when you see it. But what it means for, and let me stick with Isabel, if you are handling an investigation for your client and you discover a fact or you come across a document, what the DOJ wants you to do is tell the Department of Justice, not sit down with your client, say, this information has come in. We need to consider what it means for our overall case. We need to consider what it means for our investigation. Literally, I call it the need for speed. And that's what they expect now. And the DOJ didn't say this, but the Securities and Exchange Commission said that ABB's cooperation included, quote, real-time sharing of facts during its own internal investigation, end quote. Well, if you're a lawyer, when you uncover a negative fact, you share it with your client. That's your obligation. Well, here the DOJ said, no, we want you to share it with us. As you might tell from my little language here, I'm a little ambivalent about this, but this is what ABB did, and this is what the Department of Justice said they did. So that means that if you find yourself in an investigation, you're going to have to move from extraordinary cooperation, which is giving them everything they want, to truly extraordinary cooperation, which is something I can't tell you what it means, but they'll know it when they see it. And then the third was, once again, a theme we'll see from other cases, extraordinary remediation, or rather extensive remediation. ABB completely redid their not only compliance program, but their corporate culture. The woman who became their chief compliance officer is a friend of mine, and I had long talks with her, and she said ABB realized 20 years, 3 FCPA investigations, we have a problem with our culture. This is not policies and procedures, and we have to completely, from top to bottom, revamp our corporate culture. So they started with their culture. They, of course, put in extensive remedial measures. There was extensive employee discipline, but ABB recognized they had some problem, which was allowing them to engage in FCPA violations. So there was extensive remediation. Next was Albemarle, and this case came out in October, late October of 2023. And in this case, once again, we had worldwide bribery schemes, and there was a couple of things, or rather 3 things that were significant about Albemarle's settlement. One, Albemarle did self-disclose, but here's was the DOJ commentary around that. Albemarle investigated did an internal investigation for 16 months, then contacted the DOJ and self-disclosed. What the Department of Justice said, that was not reasonably prompt. Now, those words appear nowhere in the FCPA corporate enforcement policy. There's nothing about when you have to turn over the information. It's only that you self-disclose before anybody else does, or like ABB did it in the press. So if you, once again, find yourself either internally as a CCO finding out some bad facts, or if you're external counsel doing the investigation and you uncover facts which would lead you to conclude there is a potential FCPA violation, you need to reasonably promptly disclose to the Department of Justice. In Albemarle's remediation, there were two significant factors. Number one, Albemarle put in an entire data analytics program. And data analytics is something that the Department of Justice has really put a focus on for compliance programs, not as much for enforcement. There was a major speech in November last year where the DOJ said data analytics are now part of a best practices compliance program, and Albemarle really implemented that within their company. The second thing Albemarle did, and this is a massive change. If you've gone through this, you know exactly what I mean. Albemarle's sales model, which led to the violations, was third-party agents who were paid commissions. They completely discarded that sales model and went to employee sales and direct sales by employees, with employees compensated not based on sales, or not 100% based on sales. So they completely changed their sales model. Number three, Albemarle engaged in holdbacks. We previously talked about clawbacks and holdbacks in a prior webinar, but they did not pay bonuses to certain employees who were involved in the illegal conduct or those who had oversight over them. And the significance of this is the DOJ has a special program around clawbacks, and if your company, and holdbacks, and if your company engages, or rather either claws bonuses back or holds them back, you will receive a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your overall fine and penalty. The third case is SAP, and this is perhaps the most ubiquitous ERP software in the world. It is a German company, and they had a massive, and I mean massive, series of FCPA violations literally across the world, from South Africa to Indonesia to Azerbaijan and to Indonesia. And they had generated profits of over $103 million, yet they were able to get a very, very favorable 200 million or so fine and penalty. How did they do it? Well, they did not self-disclose. But here's the significance of the opinion. The DOJ wrote a good page about their failure to self-disclose. I did a calculation on the overall fine and penalty, and the failure to self-disclose cost SAP between $90 to $120 million in additional fines and penalties. Number two, holdbacks. The Department SAP held back bonuses of over $100,000, and the DOJ specifically cited to that. They talked about the dollar-for-dollar credit. Next was data analytics. Once again, SAP instituted a data analytics program for literally 150 countries across the globe. So the DOJ is clearly communicating they want to see data analytics. And then finally, and the remediation. The DOJ wants to see specific steps you go through in your remediation if you find yourself in one of these situations. And it begins with a root cause analysis, then to a risk assessment, and then to an internal controls gap analysis. So they've laid out the process they want to see for you. Now, from these three cases, I developed a top 10 list of things you need to do if you find yourself. Now, this is Tom's list, but it comes from these cases. So I'm pretty confident that this is what the DOJ expects. Number one, and the most important, self-disclosure. It all starts with self-disclosure. You've got to self-disclose. Number one, you get a huge benefit in the reduction of your fine and penalty, and you will buy yourself lots of credibility with the Department of Justice. Number two, the need for speed. The double secret, truly extraordinary, extra something, cooperation. So whatever that's defined as, do that. Number three, extensive remediation, documentation of what you've done. You do it. Number four, they're using a root cause, starting with a root cause, then a risk assessment, and then a gap analysis is building out your new program. Number five, data analytics. You have to have a data analytics program. Number six, clawbacks and holdbacks. You should hold back any bonuses, clawback bonuses that have been paid out. Number seven, this may not sound as difficult, but I have done this before, and I know this is a huge challenge, which is change your sales model. If you are using third-party agents rather, that are compensated on a commission basis, try something different, whether you can still use third-party agents, but perhaps pay them a salary or some other remuneration that's not directly based on their sales. 8, enhancement of your compliance program. Make sure you build out your program. And I don't mean just, this is not your remediation, but provide resources for your compliance department, increase your headcount, increase the tools that are available, show the expertise, bring in experts to assist you, whether it's in investigations, consequence management, which is incentives, or someone like me to build out the nuts and bolts, but show true enhancement of your overall compliance program. Number 9, internal controls. Now, app analysis will tell you where you have open holes in your internal controls, but remember, you have an FCPA violation, so that gives you information about the failure of your internal controls. But you should engage in continuous testing, monitoring improvement of your internal controls. And finally, number 10, your investigative protocol. Now, this is not something that was specifically laid out by the Department of Justice, but all of these factors lead me to conclude that obviously you need to have an internal hotline, you need to have a way for whistleblowers or speak up culture or someone to raise their hand and say, I've seen something. But once that report happens, how do you deal with it? Well, you triage it. If it's serious, you pick up the phone and call Isabel and say, we've got a potential matter we want you to investigate. You get that information to the decision makers so they can start the investigative process, because remember, the clock's ticking on your self-disclosure, and whatever you do, you want to make sure that you are at least in the position to make a decision on whether or not you're going to self-disclose. The absolute last thing you want is, well, it's come into our compliance office, we're thinking about it, we've sent it to legal, we're getting their opinion, and then you're on the front page of the newspaper. You've lost your ability to self-disclose, and you've got the reputational fallout. So those are the top 10 things that I need, you need to do if you find yourself in a investigation. One last point, and this is as significant as all the others, but I really can't point you to the reason why this happened. And that is, none of these companies had monitors appointed. And the Gunvor case, which came out last week, or Gunvor, a Swiss trading company, they didn't have a monitor appointed. Now, the test for monitorship, amazingly enough, the number one criteria is whether you self-disclosed or not. Well, 3 of the cases I've talked about, if you include Gunvor, they didn't self-disclose. So I'm not sure how that plays into it. But the next question or next criteria the DOJ looks at, was there a extensive remediation of the compliance program, number one. And number two, has that remediation been fully tested? In ABB's case, the answer was yes, they had. It was unclear in the other cases. So it looks like the Department of Justice is backing off requiring a monitor if you engage in extensive remediation, even if you haven't tested out your compliance program. So I went over a little bit, but I thought it was significant if you find yourself in one of these matters. The other thing is, even if you don't find yourself in an investigation, you should really pressure test or at least benchmark your compliance program as to what the DOJ has expected or what they want now, we know from these enforcement actions. So Cynthia, Isabel, and Monica, I will throw it back to you all.
Great. Thank you so much. That was so
Thank-
interesting.
Yes, Monica, just to remind everyone that please put your questions in the chat box. Identify yourself with your name and the name of your organization. But I just want to say thank you so much, Tom. It was great. I love, I don't know if I would like it here in Brazil so much when the authorities say they'll know it when they see it, because we're going to be in big trouble, trouble here in Brazil, you know. But in any case, I before we start, I just want to thank you again for these insights for 2024, and say that we will have Tom Fox here in Brazil this year. We're working on bringing him for a huge congress, and we'll also ask him to stay and give us a special course for like a week or so. So stay tuned. Monica.
Thank you, Isabel. I don't know if there are no questions at all, or if they're just not showing up for me, because I do not see any questions, but it's okay because we have questions for you, Tom. Don't worry. I hope everybody wrote down the 10 points, even though some of these in Brazil, like the holdbacks and clawbacks and all that, we're still working on legal backup to be able to do them. They're all very interesting and very important. My question is thinking of prevention and thinking of making sure that we don't let things happen. We don't even want to have to self-disclose, etc. What is, in more specific terms, the data analytics that we should have? What data should we be looking at? Could you go further into this specific point number 5? What we should be thinking when we are putting them into our best practices compliance programs?
Sure. So on data analytics, what you should start with is, first of all, make sure you have access to all data across all data silos in your organization. That was mandated by the Department of Justice in 2020, and they brought that forward. But what you should do is look for anomalies, meaning you don't have, data analytics is not going to tell you that bribery, corruption, or fraud has occurred. It's going to tell you something is outside the norm. So if you set parameters of what's the average spend of a business development person in a high-risk country, whether it's whatever you set, a low of A and a high of Z. Well, if that person is spending gifts, travel, and entertainment at triple Z, you might want to look at that. If someone has a large marketing budget, because remember, to pay a bribe, the difference in fraud and bribery, fraud is someone creating a pot of money to steal from the company. Bribery and corruption is creating a pot of money to pay someone for a bribe. The key in bribery is you have to create a pot of money. So how could they create a pot of money? Could it be overcharging on gift, travel, and entertainment? Could it be excess marketing budgets? Could it be a fraudulent contract with a third party? All of the things that we traditionally look at from the compliance perspective, data analytics gives you the ability to look at all the data. Data analytics is simply going to tell you this salesman in, you name the country, so I'll just say South Africa, they have 6 outside commissioned sales agents. I wonder why they have 6. Did all 6 go through our process? Do all 6 have different expertises that they need help with. So things like that. Commissions. Simply because someone gets a high commission because they had high sales doesn't mean they've engaged in bribery and corruption. But if someone consistently gets the highest commission in the company, you might want to look at that, things like that. So it is not a be-all, end-all, but start with the places someone could create a pot of money to pay bribes. The one that is the hardest, I think, and this comes to us out of the Petrobras scandal, which was there were discounts given from, say, U.S. company to Petrobras for a $2 billion contract. Well, I'm a contracts lawyer by professional background, and I cannot tell you 2% discount is unreasonable. Now, 2% discount on a $100,000 contract, that's pretty reasonable. And that's going to be, $20,000. That's not too bad. But a 2% discount on $2 billion, that's hundreds of millions of dollars. That can be enough to pay a bribe. So the bribes can be hidden. And if the customer is in on that, it's going to be very difficult for you as the compliance officer to have the professional expertise to do that. I cannot tell you 2% is an unreasonable discount, even at $2 billion. But it's really looking at, you can start with the low-hanging fruit with gift, travel, and entertainment, but you need to explore charitable donations. So you have a large number of charitable donations. What about distributor discounts? What about commission rates that are outside your standard? Sort of all of the things that you would think about. Now you have access to a whole lot more data, and you can see if there are any anomalies.
We do have a question by a former CCO of Petrobras, by the way, João Elec. He asks, how reluctant are boards to go for self-disclosure?
So that's a great question. And there are people on this call who've had those discussions. This is the most difficult discussion you will have as a chief compliance officer, as an outside counsel, and probably as a board member. Every lawyer I talk to who has gone through this, in-house or outside counsel, says this is the most difficult decision that you have to make, because once you self-disclose, the kimono's open. And so you have to make that. But here's the thing that I didn't really focus on. The Department of Justice has made it, or has given us significant incentives to self-disclose. There is the declination program, where if you self-disclose, extensively cooperate, extensively remediate, and disgorge your profits, you get a full declination with no penalty. That's one possibility. So no fine. But even if there is a fine, you can get up to a 75% discount if you self-disclose. That's why Albemarle got such a great result, because they got a 75% discount. ABB and SAP did not self-disclose, so they did not get the 75% discount. Or excuse me, Albemarle didn't get 75% because it wasn't reasonably prompt, but they got 50%. So there are now significant financial incentives to self-disclose. So I think the decision, the calculus on your decision is easier, but I do not pretend to say it is not an extraordinarily difficult decision. And whether you are sitting in the CCO chair, whether you're sitting as outside counsel advising the company, or whether you're a board member, it is potentially one of the most difficult decisions you're going to have to make.
Yeah, and probably the need for speed should help speed up that decision, because number 2 should strengthen number 1.
Yes.
There's a second question by Daiane Nabuco from CRA. Do you think the DOJ has become more flexible compared to 5-10 years ago with regard to FCPA non-compliance and fines?
I wouldn't use the word flexible. What I would say is they have created programs with more incentives to step forward. So there was something called the FCPA Corporate Enforcement Policy. That's been renamed to Corporate Enforcement Policy. That was released in January 2023. That's where the 75% discount was made available. In late 2017, that was when they announced the 100% discount or the full declination. So the DOJ has given more incentives and the possibility of greater discounts for stepping forward, self-disclosing, and even if you don't self-disclose, if you extensively cooperate, have the double secret extra, whatever that is, and remediate.
Perfect. Next question is from Karen from the DHL supply chain in Brazil. She said that you mentioned how ABB changed the company culture in a very short period of time. That's not an easy task. So could you give us some examples of actions and best practices to carry out this change of corporate culture in a short period of time?
Well, this was, it's still an ongoing process. It's still over multiple years, but it's just the basics. And it starts with top management. It started with their CEO saying, this will never happen to us again, and we will make sure. It starts with incentivizing employees to do business the right way. It starts with communicating that if you do engage in this type of behavior, not only will we terminate you, we will turn you over to the authorities. It includes building out a massive, and I mean massive, data analytics program for ABB literally across the world. The woman they hired, her name is Natalia Shaheda, I think is her last name. And Natalia was well known in the compliance community in the energy space. She practiced in Houston. She had gotten or been with two companies who had gone through FCPA investigations and then monitorships. So the DOJ brought, or rather ABB brought in someone who had credibility with the Department of Justice and who could communicate. And then, although no monitor was reported or appointed, rather, ABB and their outside counsel literally worked hand in glove with the DOJ in terms of this real-time communication of information and real-time communication of what the remediation program was, backed up by the data analytics to prove what they were telling the Department of Justice. So it's a major mindset shift, but it's also following through with the basic nuts and bolts of compliance.
There was a question that has disappeared from, I think it was Rodrigo Moreno, but he was building on your response on the data analytics. What happens when a company does not have money, finances, resources, human power to have a actual strong data analytics program? Are there other tools? Is there another way that you can be looking at this data and finding those red flags to make sure you don't not see something that you should be seeing?
Sure. So you're Mr. Compliance or Ms. Compliance Officer, and you don't have the funds to get a data analytics program. Think about who else in the company would benefit from a data analytics program. It is much like internal controls. What are compliance internal controls? They're financial internal controls. Does your company have a chief financial officer? Everyone has a chief financial officer. Do you have a head of internal audit? Someone's doing an internal audit at your company. Sit down with them and figure out what they need as well and how can data analytics benefit them. And talk to your CFO about the financial benefits you'll receive. You're going to uncover fraud because every company has fraud, because people are involved and there's always a few bad actors, but you'll find some lost money. Equally importantly, you will stop people from engaging in fraud simply because they know they're being watched more closely. So if you, as the compliance officer, don't have the funding, go talk to other areas, talk to HR. There are going to be areas of common interest. And if you can have funding across your corporate disciplines, that could be a way for you to get the money. If you go into the Department of Justice and say, you know, sorry, we didn't have the money, not only are they going to laugh you out of the room, they're going to punish you equally importantly. I have a colleague who's a former DOJ lawyer, and he asked a simple question: how much did you spend on paper clips last year? 100,000? 500,000? How about Post-it notes? 100,000? And you couldn't spend 250,000 on a data analytics program? What's more business critical? Post-it notes or data analytics program? So they are going to have zero sympathy, and I cannot emphasize that too much.
Yeah, that's probably the point number 6 or 7 where you spoke about the enhanced compliance program, and make sure you're putting your money where your mouth is, and you are actually putting together a program that holds water and not just for show.
So the resources is really focused not so much on your program enhancements, but what have you done for compliance? Has your compliance budget increased? Does your compliance team, have they received additional training? Did they just ship over some people from HR and say, you're in compliance now? Do they have the professional background? You don't have to start with that kind of great professional background, but you could be trained on it. Did you take training courses? Did you do that to demonstrate? Do you have certifications? All of those things to show that you've really enhanced your compliance program in terms of headcount, resources, but also the quality of your compliance department.
Okay, we have no more questions. I have one last from myself. Isabel has a question as well. My question is very simple. It goes back to the very first question about how do you convince the boards to self-disclose? Is there a math equation? Is there something, even from these 4 cases that you brought, you can probably tell, like, started out this big and it was reduced by so much because they self-disclose, and by so much because they had a good program. Is there a way we can put numbers so that we can boards love numbers? If we can just show numbers, do you think maybe you're going to bring that for us next time?
Well, the numbers are actually laid out in the corporate enforcement policies. 100% discount if you self-disclose, if you remediate, if you cooperate, and if you disgorge profit. No fine or penalty, 100% discount. Now, what you're going to have difficulty with is estimating what the overall fine and penalty could be. I am as much of an expert as a non-prosecutor can be, and it is a black box. There's a formula laid out in the U.S. sentencing guideline, and it's really, really, really difficult to figure out what your total fine and penalty could be. So that's the difficulty. But 75% discount if you self-disclose, potential, or if you don't self-disclose, potentially even 75% discount. So those are the numbers you could tell them. It is extraordinarily difficult to figure out what your potential fine and penalty would be, because there are multiple factors that the DOJ assesses after the termination of the investigation.
Okay, Isabel?
Right. I was going to say, first of all, there's an answer from our dear friend John Alec, as you remember, the former Chief Compliance Officer of Petrobras during all the Lava Jato scandal, and he appreciated your answer to his question, Tom, and he said that it will never happen again. It's a nice statement, but it must be closely monitored, and whenever the signal points out to the other direction, the CCO must speak up. Otherwise, it is hot air. That's his answer to you.
100% agree.
Yeah. I had a question. You talked about commissions and maybe simply distinguishing commissions for sales. I was going to ask you to elaborate a little more on that, because that's it's a revolution in the country. There will be a civil war with the salespeople. And how do you remunerate these people other than commissions?
So there's multiple ways to try and change that. You don't have to completely get rid of commissions. You can have some portion of a compensation based on commissions, but that is, if you don't control that, that will be in the DOJ's mind, the first place they'll look to see if you can create a pot of money to pay a bribe. If it is a third party, obviously once you pay them, you really have no control over where that money goes. But this then goes back to some of the basics. You've hired a third party. Have they been properly vetted? Do they have a contract which specifies they have to engage in certain activities and then they're paid, whether that payment's a commission or whether that payment's a salary? Did you monitor whether they actually did that? Are they paid within an approved commission rate? So typically in America, we would say 5%. But if they're being paid 15 or 20%, that should be a red flag, and you should investigate it. So it doesn't mean you can't do it, but you're going to have to put some guardrails around it. You can do bigger things like change the way a business unit is compensated so that a commission is less than 50% of someone's overall salary. So they get a base salary, you increase their base salary, their end of year bonus or bonus based upon commission is reduced somewhat. But you're going to have to do something. The DOJ is probably not going to be persuaded that a revolution will occur.
Tom, one
Thank
thing
you.
you
Go ahead,
said that really resonated with me is I think compliance officers often see themselves as being alone in monitoring and managing risk. And when you said, when you contextualize, it's everyone's responsibility, right? You can tap into internal controls. You can, you can have legal involved. You can have other members of the company also monitoring these risks to mitigate any potential wrongdoing. Have you seen anything from the DOJ or the SEC talking about, best practice, how to incorporate these other, company units into trying to combat corruption, fraud, and any other type of wrongdoing?
So Cynthia, I have not seen commentary from the DOJ, but here's what I would suggest. Every time I have talked to someone from HR about bonuses given or gifts, travel, and entertainment, and they start talking about, well, this person got an exception or this person spent more than they were allowed to without pre-approval, they just get more irritated and more irritated. Once they feel like once the policy is approved by management, everyone should follow the policy. The same with people that run internal controls. And they take the position if someone is continually overriding our control, they're mad about it. And so they can be a great source of information to you. So if you go down and talk to your head of HR and says, well, our top salesperson, we have a $500 limit on gifts. They routinely exceed that amount. Now, doesn't mean you can't routinely exceed the amount, but it does mean that you have to get pre-approval to do it. Well, they're never getting pre-approval. Or internal control overrides. If some business unit is overriding internal controls, the internal control people know it. And so they will tell you where the system is falling short. And then at that point, you as the chief compliance officer can start doing an investigation. So there's nothing I could point you to from the DOJ, but I would tell you, my experience tells me they can be the best source of information to you if you make them an ally and make clear to them that, yes, I'm the chief compliance officer, but I'm relying on you and I want to help you do your HR or internal control job.
Thanks, Tom.
Great, thank you. We encourage everyone to please ask your questions, just put them in the chat box and identify yourself. It's a great opportunity to have Tom answer these questions to us. So in the meantime, I have one more question. I take it, Tom, that you're talking about all of these expenses and commissions. You're probably also, we should also probably be more concerned about success fees, which is something that we still use here in Brazil a lot. What can you tell us about this?
Well, be very, very careful. And if it's
yes,
that's going to raise eyebrows. Yeah, that's going to raise eyebrows with the Department of Justice. If there is a massive success fee, and the problem is, if the contract's massive, of course there's going to be a massive success fee. But what you have to try to structure it in a way that you can show the DOJ or whoever the regulator is, there was true value for this. this is what this person did, and they did not unduly influence a government official with a gift, payment, or other gratuity. I don't pretend to say it's easy, but you're going to have to monitor that as closely as you can.
Good, good. You see, the problem that we have here in Brazil is really a challenge because there are vast areas in Brazil, especially in the north and the northeast, where there are small law firms, and these people are, you know, all connected with the judges and the justices and all that, and then it's a real common thing to do. So,
well, do not use the U.S. banking system. Do not send money through Miami. Do not send your emails through a U.S. server, and do not set foot in the U.S. and talk about your bribery schemes.
good advice.
There's another message from João Elecki, the former CCO from Petrobras, saying that is success regarding success fees. It's usual to establish a cap so that even for giant contracts, there won't be this excessive success fee. There will be some kind of limitation.
Yes, once again, 100% agree.
But I do like your advice here, Tom. If you have to pay success fees, make sure that there's no touch point with the United States so that you don't have the reach of the FCPA. Is that the message? Because we do find it here all the time.
Do not involve a U.S. company.
Right. If I may, I don't see any other questions here. Divert a little bit from DOJ and SEC, FCPA. I mean, I just want, there's a huge trend of suits in cases of sexual harassment in Brazil, and tons of investigations. We seem to be loaded in our firm with sexual harassment and then also bullying, work environment and all this. Since you're our compliance evangelist, can you tell us a little bit of how it's going on in the States, since we have a little bit of time left?
Well, the Me Too movement from, I think, 2016, 2017, 2018 really put a spotlight on that issue, particularly around sexual harassment. So there were lots of investigations. So we're maybe 5 years ahead of where you guys are now. And I think the sort of first wave of the most significant or the most obvious cases of sexual harassment have passed. What we're seeing now is really in the area of either whistleblowers or bystanders, meaning it's one thing for someone who is sexually harassed to step forward and say, I was harassed. But now the requirements are put on those who see it. So if you see something, say something. But if you see someone else getting harassed, you need to speak up and say that. And there are increasing protections for those people. So we're seeing more protections for whistleblowers who are not the direct harassed person. And that seems to be where we're going now. Lots of sort of whistleblower protections being put in place.
Great. There is something going on here in Brazil, but as you said, you're 5 years ahead of us. That's why I asked, because there are cases all over, and I like the aspect that you mentioned, which is if you see something, speak up. And I wondered, and we just had a client ask this question clearly, will there be any kind of punishment to those who see it and don't say anything? I'm not talking about top level here of companies, you know, other board members see what's going on and nobody says anything.
No, we're not to the point where bystanders are being sanctioned or punished. What we are seeing is board members and senior management who have evidence reported to them and are not doing anything. So whether it's the head of HR, whether it's the chief legal officer, whether it's a board of directors, those people are now being fined, punished, having clawbacks and holdbacks of their bonuses or being terminated.
Yeah, it makes sense. And
Thank you.
this question is especially important considering that Friday is International Women's Day, and that in Brazil
Right.
we have so many women in compliance, so many. So it's very important that we talk. Yes, compliance is not just about bribery. Not that bribery is not important, but
Well, that's why we call it
Yeah.
anti-corruption compliance as opposed to anti-harassment
Right.
compliance.
Exactly. By the way, if I may, our next roundtable, we call it the Mesa Redonda, that we put together every second Tuesday of the month, will be next Tuesday, March 12th, and it will be about sexual harassment. So all are invited. But we're very punctual here with Breakfast with Tom, and I just wanted to say that his white paper, lessons from the FCPA settlements, will be available to all of you who participated today in English and Portuguese, and we'll have them delivered to you to your email in 2 columns. I also wanted to say that this year we were able to have all of the dates. They're tentative, but we will have the pleasure to have Tom with us August 21st, which is a Wednesday, October 1st, which is a Tuesday also, and December 4th, Wednesday. Not only that, but we are working very hard to have Tom come here for a Congress and also give us a whole full course as he did a few years ago before the pandemic. So, Monica, Cynthia, just to wrap up.
Yes, no, of course. It's always a pleasure to be here with Tom and to meet Monica for the first time under these circumstances, and to partner up with you and Azevedo Sette, Isabel. Thank you very much to everyone who was here with us today, both in the panel as well as the audience. Thank you.
Monica, and then Tom will wrap up.
thank you, Isabel and Cynthia, and thank you, Azevedo Sette, for organizing this. Thank you to all who were here, and Tom, it was such an honor to be able to ask these questions to you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well, and I would just say I really look forward to this breakfast event on a quarterly basis, and I hope I can make it down to see you guys in person this year.
Thank you. And thank you to our interpreter. I forgot to introduce
Yes,
him
thank
first.
you, Carla.
And also, yes, and to our head of marketing at Azevedo Sette, who worked really hard on this program because we switched from Zoom to Teams, and it was a bit difficult, but it all worked out. It was great to have you all here with us. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.